I'm Imogen, and this is a presentation on technical and production developments in the live arts. So today I'll be talking about sound, light and stage. So first I'm talking about speakers and more specifically PAs. So usually we have a kind of standard PA. The thing we look for in a PA is kind of three elements: adequate level, low distortion noise or like flat frequency response, and adequate clarity. So usually with a PA you'd be able to achieve most of these pretty fairly, working with how many watts a venue requires and enough amps and loudspeakers, and how you can achieve like the first two of these, so like adequate level and low distortion, pretty easily with a standard PA, although loudspeakers can often have maybe a annoying frequency response. But clarity is the difficult one to get. In a big venue you get quite a lot of difficulty at producing the same sound level for everyone in the venue, and so you want to reach all the members of the audience with the same noise. It's less of an issue with gigs sometimes, because you can have, you know, a bit where it's really loud and then a bit where maybe people want to have a conversation. But if it's a seated venue like a theatre, you want to get everyone at the same level. And you can do this with a standard PA with delays and such, but obviously it requires a lot more money. Like, this kind of system would be more expensive than a standard system like this, and a lot more thought. But the line array has probably been the most recent and best development in PA systems, because it does this. It reaches every audience member with the same amount, the same level of sound and incredible clarity. So the J shape of the line array means that they've looked at directivity and directional control and been able to work out in the space where it will be hitting each person. You look at the correct venue data and the array angles, and you work out where the sound will be hitting, meaning the first speakers are hitting the front audience and the back speakers are hitting the back of the audience. And it means that you know, people in the front don't have really loud noise and the people in the back get really quiet. It's an even spread throughout, and this is really useful. So it means it's kind of, and they've developed more technology. Before, it was, one of the cons was that it wasn't very good at being able to move around, because you'd have to work out entirely the space and get the angles all completely right. But now they've managed to come up with smaller touring ones, and if you have the information of the space before you go in and enough kind of like laser measurers and people who know what they're doing when they're setting it up, it can be really fast and quick to set up, and it works really well. And these are kind of the frontier of PA systems at the minute. And the Opera House have kind of taken this a step further, with that they now have a K array, which is like a line array, but see if you can see the speaker.
Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah.
The second lump in from the left.
Yeah.
Well, you have to look carefully.
That is their speaker, which before, so it had, you know, the PA line array is quite a prominent thing in a theatre. You can see it massively, and obviously the Opera House like everything to blend in and look nice. And so the K array here was installed by Stage Electrics, and it's so discreet, it's almost invisible. They got it painted exactly the same gold as the proscenium arch, and within that they've got KP 102s and then some sub bass, 3 clusters either side, and in the stage they've got some front fills built in. That's a K-array. It can curve and you can do whatever you want with it. It's a pretty cool speaker.
Who makes that?
Line array, I think.
What's company? Interesting.
K-array. I think it's its own company.
Okay, cool.
I might be wrong. But the stereo image is impeccable, and it does the same thing as the line array, so it gives complete, like here, it's giving a 110-degree horizontal spread. So anywhere you are in their theatre, you're getting the same amount of sound, and the sound is always coming from the stage, which is pretty impressive considering it's just one point where you're hearing the noise from. So if I was doing a project somewhere like the Royal Opera House, or even outdoors, and it was a quite grand theatrical show, I'd want to use these K-arrays rather than a line array because it's less obtrusive and you can get it to blend in a lot easier, but it gives the same effect in terms of noise. Obviously, if money was no object, because they are quite expensive. So now I'm looking at lights, and I'd say the biggest in terms of, wait, can I do LED before we make this? Sorry, Tom, can you just pause? It's my movie.
You can't pause.
I'll pause it.
My
You
LED
can't
slows.
pause.
We'll edit this bit out.
You're gonna edit it, yeah?
Maybe, if I can.
You got a video editor on there, surely?
I think so.
I can on you when I upload it onto YouTube.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you can, can't you?
Now I can get, that means I can get my drink now.
It's Robert. Alex.
Pretty okay so far?
Eh,
It's
eh.
bad that I didn't know what brand makes it.
No, it's just like, so what company does this?
It helps to know the
Line
brand,
Array?
the company that makes it, yeah.
Line Array make this? I quite like it so far, it's good. I never knew they had that. That's sick.
Clever, yeah, I never knew that either.
I did.
Oh.
I did when she told me earlier.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't count, does it?
I think before we came in the room.
You didn't know before today, though?
No, she only knows because Jake.
Just to say, Imo, you're holding this afterwards because my arms are aching so much.
Did you know that when you weren't at the Opera House? Or?
No.
Alright, come on.
Didn't even
What?
touch
Oh, you didn't show
Do they
me.
even know themselves?
that. Probably not.
Alright, let's go.
So now I'm moving on to lights. And firstly I'm going to be talking about LED, which are probably a pretty substantial development in the technical industry in the live arts up to date. So LED lights, before we had tungsten bulbs, and now LED lights can give you more colours, a better intensity, they use a lot less energy, and you have to change the bulb a lot less frequently. And nowadays they're really starting to be a complete, like, regular fixture in a lot of buildings. You can get wireless lights. You can get wireless LED lights with up to like an 8-hour battery life, which means you save cable running and you have more flexibility in where you put stuff. Although obviously for a theatre rig this wouldn't be that great, but for an event or something like that it's really useful. The colour mix you can do on them is really interesting. Although some lighting designers argue they still prefer tungsten bulbs for the effect they can give and the hot point that you can get with tungsten lights. And currently ETC have just brought out adapters for their LED source 4s, which are these. Meaning that you can take off that lens and add this lens, turning it into a Fresnel, or this lens, turning it into a cyc flood, which is pretty cool for maybe a touring company that's doing stuff outside, because they might not know where they're going, what the space is going to be, and it means they have a lot of flexibility, or even for a theatre rig where you don't have that much storage space. If if you had enough money to buy, you know, those base fixtures and the alternating things, you could have a lot to play with, basically, without having to move a lot or store a lot, which is pretty clever. And then, obviously, the other big development in lighting is moving lights, which I've done quite a lot of research into. So moving lights came about in sort of the 1980s when the company Shoko found that twisting a certain type of filter, they were looking for a way to change the colour of the light, and what they found is they were looking for ways to better gel lights, and what they found is that twisting a filter caused a change in the colour, which would have been nothing, but then this was talked about at a barbecue lunch, and they thought about adding 2 extra motors, and this kind of boomed the discovery of making the light move. And after things took off, you had a company called Synchrolite doing PLs, and then Very Light emerged, and they kind of pretty much controlled the market for the next 28 years. And Very Light managed to control the market by combining the relevant emerging technologies, because lots of people had found out that, you know, you could make a light move or you could change the colour, but they hadn't put it into a practical system on such a large scale. And Very Light had the fortunate ability to be backed by Genesis, who were running a lot of tours back then. And so for a long time, Very Light had their own consoles. They were constantly changing things, and this meant that, so like these consoles were just Very Light, and what would happen is the show would hire out some movers, like on a Genesis tour, and all of their equipment back then was to rent, so it would come with a lighting up and with people specifically there to set up that stuff. And so obviously they were mainly used for rock to begin with, because the fans were too loud to be used for theatre, but then they fixed this and they reduced the sides and implemented convection cooling, and so they became more widely used on theatre markets and in the corporate events. And so this was all, you know, running pretty well. A lot more jobs, because obviously you had operators, you had people specifically working on moving lights. And in 2000, Very Light stopped just renting. 3 years after it became public and people bought shares in it, stopped just renting and started selling. And because they started selling, they were offering lighting projects that were products that were available for purchase. So it means that the jobs were lost, so they didn't need any of their specific operators, they didn't need people who knew the desk, they didn't need people who set it up. So like now, we have a lot of shows that come into this theatre that use moving lights. We all know how to set up moving lights, we all know how to patch them into a desk, and anyone, if you have like an ETC, anyone can opt them, which is a big change in terms of people and the industry and how we work, really, which is, I found quite interesting. And I mean, the thing with moving lights was that it opened up so much more possibility in terms of what you could do within a show, you know, patterns, colour change, the fact that they can move. And like you can see from some of these images, it just happened really quickly. So like moving from this to kind of these kind of things today is just insane and looks stunning, and it really adds like a competitive edge to gigs in our industry now and makes it a lot more interesting for audiences. So even nowadays, even small shows that we have will come in with at least 2 movers, pretty much, to make it interesting and worthwhile, even theatre performances. So I'm talking about stage. And I'd say the most interesting development for me has been automation, which is mechanising and controlling scenery, so it means that scenery can be bigger, it can be in sync. Before, you would have had people pushing on walls, props, taking stuff off. It would all have been done manually or flying stuff in and out. And now you can have these giant pieces swirling up out of the ground, or stairs coming up and down, stuff that you couldn't have done before in any way really. It means it's a lot smoother, it means it's in sync every time, and there's a lot less risk of injury. But again, it means there's a lot less people involved. There's just one guy pushing buttons rather than, you know, a whole stage crew of 7 or 8. And these are some shows where automation, so it kind of kicked off like the early stuff. Automation was involved in like the Phantom of the Opera and Les Mis as well, the barricade. And then Chitty Chitty Bang Bang is a really big one where flying is used. The flying car like swoops over the audience and it's epic. And The Lion King, where Pride Rock rises out of the ground, and like a lot of the thing with automation is it's usually just 1 or 2 things in a show that applied at the right moment can really create like a massive climax. It adds a lot more kind of like wow factor for the audience and like more complex stage effects. So if everyone was flat on the ground here, or even if, you know, people had wheeled out some stairs, it wouldn't have been as amazing as this thing swirling out of the ground with people on it, which I think is pretty epic. I guess the thing with the people is that it means more people are working out problems in a workshop space and troubleshooting and making this stuff, and less people are actually on the show working with it. And automation is used now quite widely. We have shows, or you know, remote controlled stage devices. We have shows that come in here, like Gangster Granny, that used winches to move, you know, trucks, and it's tourable now. It's easy, and it's just yeah, like I said before, a lot more kind of interesting to watch. And the manual side means that there's less chance of you know, out of sync stuff happening, stuff going wrong. Although it means that when stuff does go wrong, because it's manual, if it doesn't notice, it can be kind of catastrophically worse than if someone were pushing something, because you bump into something and you realise and you stop if you're controlling something by hand, whereas if it's a machine it will just keep going until you look and realise. And I think this kind of leads on, I've mentioned a bit, but to automated flying. So flying, we've got a lot of different types of flying out there. So you've got penthouses, which are like free weight fly rails. So you've got no counterweight, you've got a rope secured to a stage pin, and then sandbags and line locks are used for the counterweight system. But it takes a lot of grunt work to get it